Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Amanda Sue and I am so excited because today we are going to be talking about Albert Einstein's cosmic religion. Now, most of you probably think of Albert Einstein for his scientific genius and his advancements in physics, but did you know that Albert Einstein was actually a deeply spiritual person? And in fact, he wrote about his spiritual beliefs and how they not only were informed by his scientific discoveries, but actually fueled his pursuit of scientific knowledge as well. I, for one, absolutely love this connection between science and spirituality and this holistic view where things make intellectual sense, but also deep intuitive knowing sense. And so I so enjoyed learning about this and I'm so excited to share it with you. So let's jump into it. According to Einstein, he saw three main phases of religious development for the entire human collective. So if you think about ancient religions like the pagan religion of the ancient Greeks or even the God of the Old Testament, which comes from the Hebrew religion, a lot of those ancient religions are built on fear. And Einstein called these more primitive religions. If you think about it, it makes sense that early religions in human civilization were very fear-based because we were still worried about a lot of things on a daily basis. And so our limbic system, our brain, was engaged in this fight or flight and on alert quite a bit. So it would make sense that our religions were built on fear as well. The second phase of religious development, according to Einstein, is what he called a more moral or social religion. Now the religion's primary focus was less on being afraid of what the god or gods were going to do to us, and it was more about focusing on how we as humans are to treat one another. Things like the Ten Commandments, as well as other religions that are really, like Buddhism, that are really focused on how we treat and connect with each other. Einstein believed that there was a third phase of religion, which he called the cosmic religion. And this is really the religion that Einstein followed. And it's so funny to me to think about the fact that Einstein had all of this negative press whenever he wrote about this. He was called a heretic, he was called an atheist, and it's so ironic because now that we have, really it wasn't that long ago, but we're 70, 80 years past Einstein's time now, and already we can start to see that a lot of what he said just makes sense. Kind of the same way that like Galileo and Copernicus were also called atheists and heretics, but actually they were both deeply spiritual people, just like Einstein. And a lot of this is coming from this fantastic book that I read, and it came out last year, I think, or early this year, 2025, and I think it was so well written. Absolutely loved it, highly recommended. Okay, so over the years in Einstein's writings, we can deduce three main pillars of what he believes spiritually. First pillar is pantheism. And let me explain what some of these terms mean. A deist believes that there is an intelligent creator who created the universe and lives outside the universe. Basically, it was a set it and forget it thing. Like once he created the universe, he pieced out, is no longer involved. Then you have theism, which is the same thing where there's a God, supreme being, creator outside of the universe who created the universe but still interacts and participates in it. Most Christian denominations would fall under theistic because we believe that prayer works, and how could prayer work if God wasn't involved in the world answering prayers? Different from theism, where it's a God outside the universe who created it and still meddles, pantheism says that God is interwoven in the fabric of reality, that everything is God and God is everything. Now, in my tradition, which is the Unity New Thought Christianity tradition, I could make the argument that we are pantheistic. Because if we say that God is the one presence, the one power active in the universe, that it expresses as my life, that God within us is expressing as us, that's inherently pantheistic. Where critics of pantheism latch onto is saying like, okay, so a rock is God. Okay, so that table is God. But think about the perspective, the scientific perspective that Einstein had. You see, Einstein, as well as, according to him, a lot of other scientists, based on their research, based on what we know about natural laws, believe that the universe is a single entity. Now, this is a scientific principle and way of looking at it, but this has been repeated across Buddhist traditions, especially Zen Buddhism. What comes to mind is Alan Watts' work, and he has a book called The Book, which I've read a bunch of times and was a key part of the beginning of my spiritual journey, where he talks about, as the ocean waves, the world peoples. And so this expression of God is inherent in everything that exists because it all is God expressing in different ways. Okay, so Einstein's belief that the universe is a single entity, his belief in pantheism, led naturally to his second core pillar, which is the pillar of nonviolence. Einstein was an advocate for nonviolence and pacifism throughout his life. At one point, he became a vegetarian because he wanted to expand and extend that nonviolence to non-human beings as well. Einstein really believed in the power of this and was deeply hurt by what happened with his research and how it led to the creating of the atomic bomb. So he really believed that understanding the universe as a single entity, understanding that we are all expressions of the same underlying true fabric of reality, meant that any harm we do to anybody else is harm we're doing to ourselves. And that as conscious beings, our main job should be to steward creation and to recognize the awe-inspiring wholeness of every person and to be able to treat them just as good as we treated ourselves. So then that brings me to the third pillar of Einstein's cosmic religion, which is Pythagoreanism. So if you're like me, you probably only know the name Pythagoras from the Pythagorean theorem, which has something to do with triangles, if I remember correctly. So the Pythagoreans were actually a whole school of people that were led by Pythagoras and then continued after Pythagoras' death as well for some time. Their primary thing that they were researching, that they were discussing, that they were studying, that they were learning about was math. But it wasn't just math for the sake of math. See, Pythagoras believes that while you uncovered the facts of mathematics, that was how you were touching the divine, that you were tapping into a universal truth through mathematics. Pythagoras himself was known to go for weeks at a time down into caves underneath his school to sit in silence and prayer and meditation. So this entire school was built around the idea that because math works, because there are these mathematical rules that hold true and can describe everything from how plants grow to how atoms, combine and whatever the opposite of that is, to how the planets move. Because math can explain all that, it's like a secret code of the universe. So they believed very highly, just like Einstein, that the more that we discovered about the natural workings of the universe, the more that math uncovered these secret mysteries, the more we knew about God. Let's dive into some of the core beliefs of Einstein. First, Einstein believed in the importance and the beautiful experience that is awe and wonder. And we all have had that experience of awe where it's like our brain expands and we're no longer concerned with ourselves and we're seeing this bigger picture that it's like we couldn't see before. And in fact, neuroscience research has shown that this is actually a mode of our brains. So our brains have what's called the default mode network, which is where we're more self-centered and self-conscious, which I don't necessarily mean as a bad thing. It just means that we're focused on our self as a person more than we're focused on how we relate to something bigger. But there's a flip side of our brains as well. And this is what researchers are calling spiritual awareness. And it is where the boundaries between me and the rest of the world start to dissolve. My perception of time and space can start to change, and you start to recognize yourself as part of something bigger. This can be when you're out in nature or when you're looking up at the stars, when you have that feeling. I'm just gonna go with you guys know what I'm talking about. So Einstein saw this as a really key part of spiritual experience, this experience of awe and wonder. And in fact, he believed that it was every human's birthright to experience themselves as part of infinity. Okay, another key part of Einstein's cosmic religion is non-dualism, which this goes back to the pantheism thing, but non-dualism is a philosophical perspective in which everything is part of a unified whole, not separate entities. So Einstein, with his theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, was essentially proving or showing this non-dualism that he believed in. So what that formula is saying, and I'm not a physicist, but what that formula is saying is that the energy of something is equal to the mass, so the weight of it, times the speed of light squared, I think. But essentially what it's saying is that energy and mass are not two separate things. So for example, if you think of energy as like what your mind's doing, your mind's using energy when it's thinking. And then mass is my physical brain or my physical body. Those feel like two different things because mass is something you can feel and touch and see, and energy is something that you really can't, maybe not even be able to feel, you can only measure it. What Einstein's theory of general relativity did is proved that they are the same thing, that mass, a object that has a physical location and that I can touch and feel, is really just energy that I can't touch and feel, condensed into this particular part of space-time. Einstein's cosmic religion has a ton of similarities to the New Thought tradition, so I want to break down some of the key areas where they align. First is Einstein's belief that energy is the basic substance of the universe, and this falls right in line with New Thought teachings, that God is inherent in the universe, that substance is active and present everywhere, and that it is true and never changes. And so both Einstein and New Thought teach that this is the one permanent reality. I was also surprised to read this quote from the author Kieran Fox. He said, Einstein's challenge to each and every one of us was to channel the prodigious creative power that permeates all things and put it to use for pure purposes. So I was surprised that Einstein also talked about using this energy, this substance or source, and directing that creative energy for good purposes. In New Thought, we talk about the power and the responsibility of being conscious beings. That as humans, we can shape that substance in any way we see fit. So we can shape it for ill or we can shape it for good. That really the universe and that energy, that substance is neutral. We can use it in any way we want. So a more practical example of this is you attract into your life what you're thinking about. It doesn't matter if it's something you don't want or something negative or if it's something positive. So Einstein, it seems, believed this as well, and he encouraged the human responsibility to be able to put this creative substance to use to create more good in the world. Einstein once said, ideas come from God, and this is directly in line with New Thought teachings. We like to change between like capital I ideas and lowercase I ideas, which is basically the difference between the pure absolute ideas that exist in divine mind versus the filtration and conversion of those ideas that we have access to through our limited human consciousness. Einstein really saw scientific pursuit as a spiritual experience. Because if you think about it, he would spend all of this time, like many scientists or any experts in their field do, doing a bunch of research, looking at a problem from a bunch of different angles, and then sometimes it's like all of a sudden, out of nowhere, bam, there's the answer. And somehow it seems like it just comes to you from somewhere outside of you. I know I've had that experience, and I'm guessing you probably have too. So to Einstein and to New Thought teachings, that is because it is an inspiration or an idea that we have tapped into that exists in divine mind. One other similarity that I found between Einstein teachings and Unity New Thought Christianity teachings specifically was this term spiritual faculties. So Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore talked a lot about our spiritual faculties and in fact defined them as the 12 powers of man, one related to each disciple of Jesus. So these spiritual faculties are things that are inherent in us because we are expressions of the divine, but which we can tap into and develop over time. So for Einstein, those people who were truly excellent in their fields and tapping into new scientific insights or new insights in any field, we're tapping into these spiritual faculties. Curiously enough, as I was doing research, I actually found that Charles Fillmore quoted Einstein in his book 12 Powers of Man that was published in 1930. Another key connection is about the harmony or order of the natural world. So I talked about one of Einstein's pillars being Pythagoreanism, which is the belief that mathematics helps us see and uncover a natural order and structure of the universe. And one of the ways that it's expressed is how things unfold in our lives and expressed by spiritual laws holding true, just like physical or natural laws. This was a key part of early New Thought teachers, was the law of cause and effect. And just like there's cause and effect in natural laws, like when I hit something with something else, the first thing goes flying, that there's a natural law of cause and effect when it comes to our spiritual practices and our consciousness. Einstein's whole cosmic religion, his main idea was that there was no dogma in this religion, but the main teaching is that the universe is rational and that the highest destiny of man, humankind, is to ponder it and to co-create with its laws. This is directly in line with New Thought teachings. And this is the key to things like manifestation, to using affirmations to change your reality. It is all based on the idea that there's a natural order and harmony of the universe, that there are laws in place that govern our universe, and that includes spiritual laws. The other key concept that overlaps between Einstein and New Thought is the concept of oneness. Einstein said, "A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feeling as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness." So when we say things like we are all one, oneness, it is a felt sensation that Einstein would have said being a part of infinity. And it is also a spiritual, and as we're seeing, physical truth that the universe is a single entity. And the idea that we are separate from other people is just an illusion. Think about for a second like a tree. We say that there are individual leaves on a tree. There are branches on a tree, there's a trunk. So we in our minds are making the separation between these different parts or aspects of the tree. But in truth, it really is all one tree. So the same is true for us, that we can say this is where I end and where the rest of the world begins, but it's just a separation I've made in my mind. And as Einstein said, it's some kind of optical delusion in our consciousness that makes us see separation when in reality, it is all one. Another key overlap is between Einstein's idea of spiritually motivated people with this inner cosmic religious feeling, driving them on their search for truth. Charles Fillmore, Unity's co-founder, would have called this a quickening of the spirit. It's this internal sense or feeling that seems to push us or drive us or attract us to our pursuit of truth, and that is a religious or spiritual feeling that we all have access to. Now, what do you think accounts for so many similarities between Einstein's cosmic religion and New Thought teachings? Now, I would like to say that it's that spiritual intuition. Maybe it's the fact that this is the capital T truth, and similar people at similar times in human development kind of latched on to these ideas and formulated them and wrote them down. I think that's true, but I will also be fair and say that they probably had some common influences. Number one, of course, is Eastern religion. We know that a lot of New Thought teachings were influenced by Eastern religion, which the people of the West had access to for the first time really only that century or a century before. Einstein himself was a fan particularly of the Upanishads, so we know that he was influenced by it, and we know that Charles Fillmore, the founder of Unity, was influenced by Eastern teachings as well. I'd say another common influence might have been Spinoza. He was a 17th century philosopher, and there's some key ideas that he wrote about that resonate with New Thought spiritual teachings, and we also know for sure that he was a big influence of Einstein. One of those key teachings was God as immanent, so God within the entire world, God within everything, rather than a God that was outside of the world, like a deity God kind of looking down at us. That was a key teaching of Spinoza, and while he definitely was not the first person to have that idea, he was one of the more popular and well-known writers that idea might have came back to the surface at the time that he wrote it. The other concept that Spinoza talked about was this third kind of knowledge. So he talked about knowledge that we can gain through reading and studying and learning about things intellectually, knowledge that comes from doing things with our hands and learning that way. And then he talked about this third kind of knowledge, which is essentially akin to intuition, or the way I used inspiration earlier, like it's like it comes from outside of you. So that's another idea that I think is pretty important in New Thought, and Spinoza could have been a common influence on both New Thought and Einstein. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like we are seeing a revival in spirituality and religion here in the West. So when it comes to what role religion should play in the future of humanity, Einstein believed, number one, that spiritual search, that spiritual quest was absolutely essential to the human spirit and to the advancement of humankind. In order for religion to remain relevant in our lives, any type of organized religion, it had to not only stir that ancient spiritual impulse that's within each of us, but it also had to be adaptable and flexible enough to integrate our new scientific understanding. And that's one of the things that I love about my spiritual path, is that as we learn about things in physical, natural laws, as science advances and we learn crazy things about quantum physics, it's not a threat to my spirituality. If you're on your own spiritual journey and you want to learn about more of these types of teachings in a space where you can ask questions, disagree, and grow, please consider subscribing to my channel. Make sure you get notified of new videos that I post, because these are exactly the types of things that I discuss on my channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about Einstein's cosmic religion. I hope it excites you as much as it excites me to have a nice cohesive view from a scientist of something that directly aligns with maybe what you already know to be true. So I'll catch you on the next video. Until next time, love you.